in this meeting. The recordings, when they are done, will be posted on our local government center website, as well as MACo's website for future reference, or if you need to go back and look at it, or have other people in your staff review the contents of this meeting. I think that's all I have to share for kind of an introduction. We're glad you're all here. And with that, I believe we'll turn the time over to Mr. Eric from MACo.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. And thanks for introducing our special guests. I'll tell you the reason that they're there, but I also see another one. Nanette Gilbertson is from the Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association and County Attorneys Association. I invited all of the local government lobbyists that are in a kind of group distribution that we have here, and any of their members if they wanted to participate, because the point of discussion today is what likely will be a proposed amendment to either House Bill 632 or potentially the broadband bill that would prohibit local governments from funding indirectly or directly lobbying activities. And that has an impact on the Treasurers Association, MACo, the League, county attorneys, sheriffs and peace officers, everybody out there that uses any kind of dues to promote education efforts during a legislative session that could be perceived as lobbying. That amendment, the theory or the thought behind that amendment comes from Senator Hertz, who is advocating pretty vocally his objection to public entities spending any resources on lobbying activities. There's probably good background on that and reasons why, and we can get into that if that comes up in the question and answer, but it's going to take a lot of outreach on our part to make sure that the legislature understands that our efforts are for the benefit of your communities, and our organization, although not unanimous, does and has a process to represent the interest of, at least for MACo's perspective, Montana counties. Some of his conversations recently have been about, for example, I'll use MACo. MACo doesn't speak for all elected officials. And while that's true, when MACo takes a position on a bill, we have pretty good mutual respect within our organization that even if individual members oppose the position that we take, we do it in a pretty respectful way. Just like the legislature doesn't always unanimously vote on the things that they vote on, MACo doesn't either. But when we take a position, that position has gone through a vetting process and has been done so either by the membership at large or by our executive committee. The amendment, Kelly, I don't know, or Tim, I don't know if you want to jump in because you've had the most recent conversations with Senator Hertz. The amendment, as we understood it, and again, I have a picture, like a screenshot of the language, so I know what it's intended to say. But my understanding as of late yesterday afternoon, or even to the evening, was that it was likely going to be placed on Representative Garner's 632 bill, the bill that appropriates and gives expenditure authority for the ARPA funds. And Kelly, I'm not sure, Tim, if you two have better updated information on where it might be going.
Kelly, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, I talked to Senator Hertz today. He basically reiterated what you just said, Eric. And I just started getting concerned because we're so focused on 632, the ARPA bill, that this is the time of the session when we might see things pop up somewhere else where we're not paying attention. So started poking around a little bit, did hear that it could be 297, the broadband bill. I have gotten a copy of the amendments to those. It's not in there. So I will be spending the next hour or two this afternoon going through basically every bill I can think of that's still alive out there and searching for the words lobby, county, influence, etc. And I will let you know if I find anything.
So, general discussion, questions, any advice that you have for how we want to head this off? Commissioner Barron, I'm going to go to you.
I was going to say I have some, but this is recorded, so it's we do not have to be a member of MACo. It's voluntary. So if we don't like the way lobbying is going or things are being done, we can opt out of the organization. There's I think Jason's email earlier today all the different organizations that will be affected by this bill are huge. And it's going to take the voice of counties and cities away. We're going to be at the mercy of the state legislature with very little opportunity to address concerns. When I don't get phone calls back from Greg when we don't agree with stuff. So.
Well, I do think that's his point. I think to a certain extent, the effectiveness of local government lobbying has been frustrating for certain members of the legislature. I mean, bad bills have been stopped for really good reasons based on local government lobbyists doing a good job of educating what the intended and unintended consequences are. But I think the meat of our message needs to be that his default is, you know, real elected officials can come and testify anytime they want. I think our message needs to be organizations like MACo and the League do a great job of advocating for, in our case, 56 different counties spread across a large state, for elected officials that have real jobs that can't take the time to take 90 days off and sit in Helena to analyze the consequences of all kinds of bad decisions. I think our advocacy works really well for all of our counties, but in particular our small rural counties, both in terms of education and outreach and advocacy. I'll take Lake as an example because Commissioner Barron, you've said time and time again, but for MACo's involvement, a lot of initiatives that Lake County wanted would never have gotten fair hearing in front of a legislative committee.
If it wasn't for MACo, yeah, if it wasn't for MACo, we would not have even had the opportunity. And at least they heard our issues before, even if we didn't get the bills passed, but they heard our issues, and MACo was a huge part of that. I mean, MACo was what got us there. And we would be totally lost without MACo. We'd soon not be a county, probably.
Eric.
Eric, if
Yeah.
I might, if there's a second for a comment, Commissioner Osland and Billings, and I have to tell you, I look at it a little differently. I think lobbying is the dissemination of information so that the legislators can make a good decision. And we have one bill after another that imposes fees, taxes, or burdens on local governments, unfunded mandates, changes the tax distribution for the people that we represent. And I take exception to the fact that we shouldn't have a voice to educate the rest of the lawmakers on what that will do to the local community. I think that is, that bill is a little bit ill-received on my account. I think that would do a disservice to the taxpayers and leave them very vulnerable to really bad legislation.
This would really open the door to big money organizations to be able to come in and lobby for something they want that would be detrimental to counties, and we'd have very little voice.
I agree.
Yeah, and just to chime in, I mean, having been a legislator recently and now being an urban county commissioner, it has been really eye-opening going through my first session on this side of the fence, how difficult it is to keep up with everything that's happening in the building. If you're not there physically, and I have more connection to the process and proximity than most of your average folk, just having served in the last legislative session. And it is still, it's really been surprising to me how fast paced everything is, and keeping up with all the stuff here in our day-to-day job while trying to keep track of stuff in Helena. It wouldn't even really work unless we moved to Helena for a few months and we're there physically, representing our interests as commissioners. And then we would be neglecting all the duties that we were elected to do on a day-to-day basis.
Commissioner, because you open up that door as a former legislator and with a direct connection to the current legislation, messaging, how can we convince rational members of that, both the House and Senate, that local government lobbying, I agree with Commissioner Osmond, it's more education than anything, but how can we message that to make sure they understand that it's important and that our job is to help them make better informed decisions?
Maybe a thread to run with is just to say you'll end up with runaway property taxes because the legislature will be in an information vacuum, making policy decisions that pass along unfunded mandates to counties, and our only tool is to use property taxes to pay for those unfunded mandates. And so maybe just hammering that thread to say part of our job is to help keep property taxes down by reminding you that many of your policy ideas have costs at the local government level. And if you tell us to do something and you don't understand fully the consequences of it, we have to implement it and then we have to pay for it. And so maybe just hammering on the property tax burden, which is something that, Greg Hertz hates property taxes and most of the conservatives in the legislature do as well. So maybe framing it as we're trying to be stewards of local government spending. And if you kick us out of the building, we're not going to be able to remind you of unintended consequences that will drive up taxes for your constituents.
I like that. Thank you.
And also with that, that's a very good piece of that. But also when they sort of start the session out, seems like there's plenty of notice to give you a couple days to, touch your bill if the county's bill, if that's in particular. But as it gets to this crunch time, there's stuff that happens that we have no idea what they're doing. That is why I think it's necessary to have somebody in the building, because 56 counties and cannot be sitting around that session the whole time, and somebody's got to. So that's the big part about it is this notice and things. That if we didn't have the MACo staff or the organizational staff, there things happened up there we'd have no idea until it's too late.
Well, and Commissioner,
This is Todd Devlin. Can I say
sorry.
something?
Go ahead, Todd.
This also affects us dramatically on the national level. Now, because you can't have lobbying, that also means on the national level we can't pay our dues or anything to NACo too. And you talk about a huge lobbying clout there. That's millions and millions of federal dollars. Just ask McGinley and his road department.
well,
Eric,
and I think Gail Decker made a good point in the MACo probably prevents a lot of lawsuits because of bills that would be passed that they don't understand everything, and so lawsuits come out of it. And I think we keep the state and counties out of a lot of lawsuits by being part of this organization and what we do in legislation.
Eric, this is Roman from Mineral County. What, because the state, aren't they also including some of the state agencies that might have lobbying groups? What kind of traction thus far is the bill getting, or is it being seen as probably it's going to have issues?
It's only really come to light yesterday morning, and we still haven't seen an official draft yet. Like I said, it's got a snapshot on it. And the language they use says that the lobbying prohibition for any state, city, or county engaged in lobbying activities, but would allow elected officials to continue to, because you guys don't technically lobby, but elected officials could weigh in on legislation pending before the legislature. We'll have to wait to see what the final version of it is, but part of it I thought was the tiff, the fight that's happening right now between the Republicans and the judiciary, because they're alleging that it's an inappropriate use of public resources to lobby. I'm not sure that is the genesis behind it. I just know that they are trying to capture state organizations, counties, and cities and prohibit lobbying among the three of those. Schools aren't mentioned, but because they don't use a generic definition of local government, but I imagine in further deliberations, they'll just add that to it and prohibit schools.
Greg, Chilcott, do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, one of my big problems is the disingenuous nature of his message. He's trying not to use public dollars for lobbying, but we turn around, we can drive over there, 56 counties sending representatives over there, have people camp there in different housing rather than having people live there doing the job and keeping us informed. Mike's point about the pace and scale of the bill, going through the process, especially in the last quarter of the session, the games they play when they pull something off the table in the 11th hour, and we're not there to see it. You know, the arrogance of the legislature to presume that we don't need assistance when you're, 400 miles away in eastern Montana or 200 miles away in western Montana from the state capital is absurd. And again, we can't be there monitoring bills like this very bill or amendment being brought up by Senator Hertz in the 11th hour. If we didn't have people such as you there, we'd be left holding the bag. And they need our voice represented. And if they want to listen to 180 commissioners and staff calling and blowing up their emails and their cell phones, rather than having some lobbyists and executive committee folks over there carrying the message, we can tie that up too. And I don't think it's going to enhance the process.
The dues.
Eric, I'm sorry. This is Chris Kukulski.
County pays are a drop in the bucket to what it would cost them to try to go lobby for something. I mean, there's just how many counties could truly afford to, like you say, we'd have to have somebody there for the whole session. We'd have to find room and board for them. We'd have to still pay their wage. That voice, there's just not many of us that could afford to do that. And that voice would be gone.
I'm including that in the notes, that notion of a consolidated voice saves money. Chris Kukulski, I heard you.
So on the city side, of course, and you well know this, Eric, most of our elected officials are not full-time. Most of them have full-time jobs outside of they're volunteering as city council members, town council members. So it's probably a desired outcome, which is to keep us away. But you're saying only my 11 elected officials are the ones who are expected to park out in Helena? That's not going to happen. I get that they don't want to hear from me, but I'm asked to represent them because few of them can engage in this stuff daily. So I think on the city side, there's a whole additional message about the local elected officials. Overwhelmingly, this is not their career. This is not their job. They have full-time jobs. They're volunteering.
Good
Yeah,
point.
Eric, I think it's also important to remember, and this Tim Burton with the league, that the league is 90 years old. MACo's older than that. And we're both nonpartisan, apolitical organizations. We work for elected officials all over the state that are Republican, Democrat, and independent. We've got a process similar to MACo where we go through annually, biannually, and establish what the resolutions and guiding policies are for the organization. If something comes up during the session that we don't anticipate, we meet with our board of directors and get direction. And so many times, whether it's through the interim or through the regular legislative process, we provide information based upon the complex nature of running cities, towns, and in Eric's case, counties. And better information adds to better decisions. And in our case, we think it's worked well that way for over 90 years. There is a national playbook out there. I don't want to go into that, but it's a philosophy, and I think that's where this bill comes from. It really, I think, would upset the apple cart in terms of how government functions and how, I mean, we have at least 1/3 turnover in the legislature every 2 years. We're constantly educating elected officials up at the state on how cities and counties function, how the tax system works, etc. And it's very complex stuff. So 9 out of 10 times, we're more a resource than we are possession. But when it's going to negatively impact or positively impact the way our elected officials can run their governments, then we weigh in and take a position on your behalf based upon policies that have been adopted by the entire organization. So it is last minute. It's coming our way. We're still trying to figure out where it's going to surface. But I don't see any positive outcome to this amendment.
One more quick comment, Eric and Tim. I think this is maybe a obvious thing to say, but it might be worth saying. Greg plays this game sometimes, and certainly some others in the legislature do, where they throw in a bill concept that's just going to stir the pot. And so I would encourage you all to just not get completely fixated on this particular concept, because sometimes folks will throw out something that's really controversial over here to divert resources and attention in that direction. And while they're working on something else over here. And this seems like certainly could fit within that category, where they know it'll stress a lot of folks out and consume a lot of time and attention and resources from organizations like ours, and it may be a literal tactic to distract us from something else.
I think those are good words of wisdom, and part of the reason that we're not calling for a all-out, blast to all the elected officials yet. But I'm still inclined to take it seriously, because he's confirmed to me, to Jason, to Kelly, and I think to Tim that this is an actual real plan of his. We just don't know where it's going to land. So I'm riding that fence on what our response should be, and I guess I'm inclined at this point to say, if there's a discussion out there among legislators to prohibit local government from lobbying, they need to hear from local government elected officials. Nobody's going to convince anti-lobbying, or no lobbyist is going to convince an anti-local government lobbying advocate that they need to save the lobbyists. So I think you guys need to start making some phone calls.
So Eric, this is Diane McLean.
Yeah.
Tell us again whose bill this is, or amendment?
I can tell you that the draft was asked for by Senator Greg Hertz. And originally it was a proposed amendment on 632, but the league might think that it's going to go on Ellsworth's 297. Is that the right number, Kelly? And we're going to find out more this afternoon, I think, when the drafter gets done with House business, exactly where it might land. But it's clear and confirmed it's Senator Hertz's idea.
Thank you.
We've got a question here. A hand is raised. Name of Nanette Gilbertson. If you want to unmute and ask your question.
I was just going to add, I mean, a lot of the things I was going to say have been covered, but I don't know if this argument would resonate with someone like Hertz, but perhaps with other legislators. Our legislative body is a citizen legislature, and they were not meant to craft policy and create budget and appropriations in a vacuum. They are citizens. They have a whole host of other duties. They're part-time, just like many city electeds. And we are the wedge between the public and the legislature as lobbyists. And many of them know that we provide valuable information and that they were not ever meant to create policy in a vacuum. With term limits, that's even more critical. You know, we heard today a study bill requested that it was a concept that was studied 2 interims ago without lobbyists there to say, here's the study that was conducted 2 years ago. You don't need to do this again. It would be a waste of time and resource. Then they often will go forward with things. So I think that's worth mentioning. Having only the elected officials be able to speak on behalf of any piece of legislation. And I know elected officials work extremely hard. I respect all of the elected officials I work with, but they rely on the administrators and employees who work for them and with them for much of the day-to-day nuts and bolts information. So when we eliminate that piece of information and critical component, then the legislature loses out. And then lastly, if there's concern about impropriety from a lobbyist perspective, I find our reports to the Commissioner of Political Practices somewhat onerous, but we all do them. There are mechanisms currently in place that we all have to abide by, rules, guidelines, reporting that we all have to abide by, and we do so. And so there is already a current level of tracking and transparency, making this whole policy statement that I think Senator Hertz is trying to make just completely unnecessary. So I don't know if any of those comments would resonate, but things to think about. Thank you.
They help. Thank you.
Sorry, this is Chris again. I couldn't agree more with Nanette's comment. And couldn't you imagine if they just locked themselves up in the Beltway in DC and nobody gets to engage in the conversations that are going on there? We would never go to our senators and representatives and suggest the rest of us shouldn't have any access to state government, shouldn't have access to their federal government.
Dan or Eric, this is Dan Ellison. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
You know, and I work for Jefferson County. None of our county commissioners have time today to even be on this call, let alone, you know, spend time up at the Capitol. And I mean, they're worried about the Basin Water and Sewer District that resigned and about the mental health board that they need some assistance with. And so I don't do much in the way of conventional lobbying. You know, I've only been to the Capitol a couple of times this session, but I do track a lot of bills. I keep the commissioners informed and had the opportunity to meet with all three of them yesterday when we had the reception for the Highway Patrol down in Boulder. And basically what they told me was, give me a list of our legislators, and we have 4 that have parts of Jefferson County or all of it in their districts, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, you know, 3 House members, 1 senator. And they're going to weigh in with all of them and say, you know, we think this is a bad idea. And so I would simply encourage all of you that are on the call and with your colleagues to get a list of your local legislators, you know, that represent all or parts of your counties and cities, and let them hear from you. And that's what we're planning to do. And we're only going to touch about 4 of the legislators, but I think if everybody on the call did that, you know, they would pretty soon get the message that they think that this is a bad amendment, and what bill it's attached to, you know, it doesn't really matter as long as we stay vigilant and watch and see where it might surface again. And to the point that was just made a few minutes ago, this might be kind of a big smokescreen for something else that's going to stick its nose under the tent in another piece of legislation. So you got to stay vigilant on that score as well.
I agree, and thanks, Dan. The outreach is absolutely important, and I agree that it has to be elected official to elected official, without seeming reactionary, to Commissioner Brown's point. Any additional comments? Jason, I see you joined us in the corner of some smoky backroom corner of the Capitol.
Yeah, but I'm not alone, so.
All right.
So Eric, the question from Todd Devlin. Eric, this basically would, MACo would no longer exist.
We would have to convert all to education, member services, all the non-lobbying traditional functions that we provide. It would have a dramatic impact on what our business operations look like. You know, we spend time and considerable effort lobbying. So yeah, if we were prohibited from doing that, it would dramatically change MACo.
But does the way the statute or way the amendment's written or intent is not just at the state level, it also be at the federal level?
Not according to the draft that I've seen, but again, that's likely going to be thought of, discussed, and revised because the perception that local government lobbying shouldn't be done at the state level would carry over to the federals. And there's one other point here that I want to be careful about. Our activities have been validated by Attorney General's opinion based on statutes in Title VII that allow for associations to function, right? I don't want to point that out to Senator Hertz as a response to his proposal, because I don't want him to go directly at the heart of your ability to create these organizations. Basically, don't want to point out that we exist with or without the lobbying function. So Commissioner Devlin, I don't think at this point, he's not prohibiting federal lobbying, but I see that as the next step.
Well, I see it as that it's just a secondary impact, negative impact that happens, or an unforeseen impact that happens because the way MACo is set up, everything that we do at the national level goes through MACo. It would be a real cluster if we did it individually. I mean, it would just be a disaster. We'd have no influence whatsoever at the national level.
Agreed.
The impact with the cities and the National League of Cities would be the same, Commissioner.
So that's another issue. We get run over at federal level, not just the state level, because we would have no organization at the state level in order to send our representation and views to the national level. We just wouldn't. It would be a cluster.
You would have no paid staff to do advocacy. That's the short end of it, federal or state.
Does he understand what influence we have on the national level, like with NACo, like Joe's position and these other positions? Montana has a real voice on the national level that would cost, a voice that would be beneficial to our legislature.
I agree, I don't think Senator Hertz understands that, and I'm a little reluctant to point out that our advocacy is as good on the national level as it is on the state.
Dennis Pittman, you have a question.
I do. I just, the comment, I guess, of watching this, but being prepared. I mean, the counter attack on this is really, if this is what you want, all it takes is the League of Cities and Towns and Eric to put out an email saying, I need every commissioner and every city council member and every mayor in the state to show up at the Capitol. This is what you get if this is what you want. And is that really, I mean, if you want to go, I mean, is that really what they're asking? Is us to pull that trigger and say, do we all need to drive and be standing on the Capitol steps knocking on your door? Or would you rather just see Eric?
No, that's a catch-22. Use Chantel as your example, please. But point taken. I don't think this is a bluff. I also don't think this is a distraction. I think this is something Senator Hertz is trying to slip in the waning hours of a legislative session. And I'll tell you, I don't know that he thinks he can get it done this time, but I know he's going to try. And this is setting up for repeated attempts from Senator Hertz to do this until he's termed out.
So this is Nanette again. I think it is important for all legislators to hear from their locally elected officials. I think the conference committee members are probably really important to focus on because they're the 6 people who are going to be hearing this amendment and voting on the amendment. So for the purposes of the House, that's Representative Garner, Representative Bartel, Representative Keene, and then for the Senate, it's Osmondson, Cuff, and Lynch. So again, I see enormous value in all legislators hearing from elected officials, but those 6 they're going to have the vote to either put this on, at least if the attempt is in 632. Those are the 632 conference committee members. As Kelly said, we need to watch all others, but.
Yeah, and I think 297 is going to be amended today in appropriations. And in fact, I think they're meeting as we speak.
We've got a question or a hand raised. It's a phone number. The last 2 digits is 69. If you've got a question.
Shelby.
Hi, Shelby.
I guess kind of in line with, I think one of the other speakers on the call said, and I guess I'm curious about the line of, if Hertz's thought behind this is that local government or, citizens in their respective communities don't want to see their tax dollars spent lobbying. Does anyone on the call see anything wrong or any flaws with the argument of, if it's not us, like, we are reducing the number of taxpayer dollars that would be spent on lobbying by being up here, because otherwise, like someone else pointed out, you have some people driving up here, feel like community members would most likely rather see their tax dollars spent with their commissioners actually working and doing the work of the community versus hanging around up here. But I'm just wondering if, before we jump into that argument and start using it, which I think it's a good one, if anyone else sees any holes in that is going to set us up for anything else before we start using that.
Anyone?
I agree 100% with that, because, even Pittman said the same way. I mean, I don't know if they need to see it. If you need that call for every commissioner and councilman and everybody show up there and at one of these hearings, and then mandate, or how we can get it done is they cannot limit our time to speak. If we've got to drive 200, 400, whatever, how many miles is hell, and we want to be able to speak to them, and then they limit the time you can be there. That is why we do it, and it's an efficiency. I don't know how many dollars we save by hiring our staff. So that's what it's for.
I think I can make the case that it's an efficiency issue. And then, to Shelby's point, if I were more blunt and frank, the conversation would be this: you don't need local public sector lobbyists that the legislature would listen to and advocate for the best interests of local governments. They don't. Thus, you need lobbyists.
And that, why you're being blunt, I mean, it's the same way. What are you trying to hide, Senator Hertz? I mean, that's what it says to me.
All right. Well, I want to turn the page at least briefly and say we're essentially on standby. I'm going to ask that the local electeds for the free conference committee members reach out to those guys: Bartell, Keene, Gardner, Osmondson, Cuff, and Lynch, which puts us at Silverbow, Fergus, Flathead. Where's Cuff? Up northwest?
Lincoln, I think. Yeah.
Lincoln. Yeah. So get ready if you're from that neck of the woods to start doing some targeted outreach to those folks. And then everybody else is essentially on standby for, if it gets applied to any bill, we will do the all call elected official to elected official. Any more comments about that? I have two other brief updates. Both of them are relevant for everybody on the local government side of it. The marijuana bill, House Bill 701 or whatever version of it, has been consolidated through the made up free conference committee on the Senate side, is going to come out. And I know there's been discussions, especially you folks in Yellowstone have been anxious, or you have been lobbied to have the provisions be opt out or opt in. I'm not sure, but let me just tell you what the bill is as amended last night. And you're going to think that I'm crazy, and I am crazy, but not because of this. If your county voted to support the initiative, you are an opt-in county. If your county vote from the initiative failed, you're an opt-out county by default. And the whole bill is structured around you being in if you voted in and out if you voted out. There's a provision for the traditional Title VII referendum, 15% petition signatures to then reverse that. But there's no provision for the municipalities to exert that control themselves. So, for example, Yellowstone County voted to support the initiative. That means that the city of Billings and Yellowstone County will be able to do what they need to do to specify, define, allow the different types of businesses, as is defined in that in this bill, to operate: cultivation, sale, transport facilities. I can't remember the couple other ones. Fergus County did not pass the initiative. So Fergus County is an opt-out county, but any providers that are currently licensed in Fergus County will be able to continue. And if the voters in either scenario want to opt out or opt in based on how they voted before, that it requires a petition of 15% of the electorate to be able to cause an election to change what the previous vote happened. Does that make sense? And is crystal clear to everybody? Kelly.
So minor modification there. So with respect to if you're an opt-out county or a municipality in an opt-out county, it looks like there is treatment of counties and municipalities separately to be able to bring that vote to allow for it in the municipality. Where it's not pulled apart is in the local option tax, which is now back in. So if there was a local option tax to come to the voters, it would have to be countywide. The 15% vote to petition for it would have to be countywide. And then there's a set allocation of the dollars that is set up in the statute. It would be 50% to county, 45% to all of the new municipalities based on their population against the total county population. And I think that local option tax provides better allocation of dollars to the locals than what we were getting under I-190, which was just that 10% kind of left over after everybody got their cut at the state level.
And the local option split is 50% counties, 45% cities.
Yep. And then that 5% that's left over goes to the state for administration.
The bill, as I said, they had a made up kind of conference committee on the Senate side. It's on second reading in the Senate today. I'm not convinced that it goes to Senate Finance and Claims. And Kelly, I don't think you and Tim are convinced that it goes to free conference.
Yeah, we heard this morning, probably not free conference. And then about half an hour ago, we heard, yeah, maybe free conference.
Yeah, that's going to have to. So more to come on the marijuana bill. And then my last one, because I have to get going here pretty soon. As we were sitting here, I got a text message from the chair of House Judiciary that House Bill 94, the liability wrongful incarceration bill. I'm being told that the governor is going to do an amendatory veto to require counties to pay half of the costs of the liability for wrongful incarceration. As you know, counties have already spent about $13 million in wrongful incarceration for two defendants tried on state charges, convicted in a state court, sentenced to a state prison, and exonerated. And the counties ended up footing the bill for that wrongful incarceration. So I think we'll likely object to a mandatory veto saying that the counties have to pay for wrongful incarceration claims. We already do. And that was our point in this bill as it stands right now. So get ready for that one coming. Any other questions, comments, anything for the good of the order?
We've got a question in the chat about any other guidance on the ARPA funding coming from Treasury yet.
We had a call with the National Association of Counties. Matt Chase and the current president did an outline. Two things that are important, and I think we've told the folks that are in limbo. You need to have your DUNS number and your SAMS registration. Get those done, and if you're not SAMS registered, we've sent out notice to the 3 counties that aren't. I don't think they're on the list here, but if you're not, get that done because it can take up to 3 weeks if you've never had a SAMS registration number. They expect Treasury guidance to come out pretty comprehensive middle of next week. There's still no indication other than there's been a lot of back and forth between the National Association of Counties and Treasury, the League, National League and Treasury, and the White House has stood up a ARPA department in the White House that's going to coordinate and has been bringing that information, questions, and details back and forth to Treasury. So I think their goal is to issue really good guidance the first time and not have to do multiple iterations as they did under CARES. That being said, long story short, middle of next week is the hope, because the deadline is still around, according to the calendar, May 10th for those direct deposits to come out and be wire transferred to your accounts.
Anything else for the good of the order? Comments, questions?
You guys can talk away. Chantel will handle it from, is she still on?
I'm here.
Yeah, I'm ducking out, so you have it from here on out. And thank you, everybody, for your time and patience today.
Thanks.
Okay, this is McGinn. I guess Chilcott's still on. Yep. And all you and Devlin stuff. I represent you guys on the National Forest and Counties Coalition. I've got a conference call with Treasury next Friday on the revenue sharing counties money. That's the sort of the SRS pill that's on top of this.
Late summer. That's when the guidance is expected, is late summer.
Late summer. Okay, all right. Well, I might get a hold of you, Chilcott, if you know a little bit more about this, whether you're going to be on that call also. Okay.
All right, Chantel, you have anything else you want to report or anything?
I think Eric covered it all. Ooh, there's a nice echo. Yeah, Eric shared. I can't even talk. We'll stay in touch and keep you guys posted on whatever comes out from whatever we hear. So just please stay tuned because, you know, we might need your help on this one.
Hey, Chantel.
Mm-hmm.
Chilcott. If you find out it's attached to 297, would you let me know and I'll reach out to Ellsworth?
Absolutely. If we get any notion that it's attached anywhere else besides 632, we'll let everybody know.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else from anyone any questions or comments you might have? I don't see any hands being raised right now.
Hi, this is Diane McLean, Dan. I do have a hand up, but I just have a question. Commissioner Peterson was at a Fresno meeting last evening, and came back today and mentioned something about Jennifer Patrick, who has been working very hard in the St. Mary's diversion repairs and all that stuff for years and years, was told that the counties on the High Line, that the ARPA funds that they were to receive there was an effort to divert all of that to St. Mary's. And so just curious if anybody's heard anything to that nature.
I have not heard that at all. No, but we'll look into that one for sure.
Great, thanks, Diane. Chris Lonsberry, you've got a question or a hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Chantel, with HB 257 passing, do you guys have contact with the governor about a veto for that or an update?
Which one is 257?
257 would make it unenforceable when, say, sewage is backing up in a business to actually, close the business down. It's one of the public health bills.
Yes. I believe that we have had some contact with the governor's office on the final public health bills. I'm not entirely sure where it stands. I feel like there could be a veto on the way. Off
Hey,
the record.
Chantel, this is Rebecca. I'm happy to provide a very quick update. House Bill 257 is one of the public health bills put forward by Hinkle. It was concurred in this morning on the House floor with Senate amendments. And while it was, we've been told it will be vetoed, but I have reason to believe that that is less likely to be true. I did speak with Eric about this yesterday, and my understanding is that MACo is not putting anything forward for a veto letter at this time. I don't know if that's changed, but on behalf of public health, I think it would be fantastic if MACo would consider putting forward a veto letter, since we already have 121 signed, and this bill would directly impact potentially parts of how House Bill 121 can move forward and be implemented for all of you. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Yep. I don't see any hands right now. Nothing new in the chat.
Yeah, I tried to put something in the chat, Dan. I was just wondering on ARPA if anybody knows when we might expect more detailed Treasury guidance on the types of projects that might qualify.
This is Chantel. No word on that yet officially. I feel like it should be coming soon because we're getting a lot of correspondence about getting your account set up and making sure that you're ready for the money to come. So there, with that, there should be some guidance coming with how you should spend it.
Is that what is expected out middle of next week, or is that going to be later?
I do not know.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Zach. Anything else from anyone else?
Yes, this is Frank, Blaine County. Do we have to forward our DUNS and Sam's number anyplace, or?
Yeah, there was some correspondence sent out about that. I'll follow up with you after this.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, it looks like we're kind of getting to the end of any sort of additional questions or comments. Again, we appreciate your participation. This meeting has been recorded, and what we'll do is when it's rendered, I will send it on to Chantel and onto our staff, and we'll try to get it posted sometime later on today. I believe our next session, town hall meeting, will be in 2 weeks. The date of that, if you want on your calendar, will be, I don't know, the 7th. Looks like the 7th of May. Does that sound right, Chantel?
It does. That's what I'm seeing.
Okay, we're still happy because I think things will start to be wrapping up at the legislature, so everyone will be anxious. And remind us, when's the last day? They expect the last day to be for the legislature?
They expect the last day to be next week, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. However, Sine Die is officially scheduled for the 13th. They have not a lot left to do. Study resolutions are the only thing coming out, and those are even winding down. So I believe that the transmittal for revenue and appropriation bills that are amended is, I want to say, so the 28th or the 29th next week. After that happens, those bills are, there's going to be nothing left. So there's not a lot of work left to do.
Okay. Great, thank you. Well, folks, we appreciate your participation. If there, oh, Chris, do you have a comment or question? Nope, we're just saying goodbye. Okay. All right, folks. Thanks so much. And we look forward to seeing you again in a couple weeks.
Have a good one.
Thanks.